The morning alarm echoed through the empty halls of the human embassy on Kelthera Prime. For 3 months now, the sound had played to no one. Dust gathered on the reception desk where Sarah Chen used to greet visitors with that strange human smile. The coffee machine in the break room still held half a pot of the bitter liquid humans loved so much. Council Administrator Zekthor walked through the abandoned building, his 6 legs clicking on the polished floor. His blue skin had turned pale with worry. This was the 15th human facility he had inspected this week. All of them were the same, empty, clean, left behind like the humans had simply decided to take a very long vacation. But they weren't coming back. The datapad in his clawed hands showed the same impossible numbers he had been staring at for weeks. Every human colony across 17 star systems. Every human ship in known space. Every human citizen, from the tiniest baby to the oldest elder, gone. Vanished in a single night 3 months ago. No distress signals. No emergency broadcasts. No battles. No goodbyes. Zekthor stopped at Ambassador Rodriguez's office. The human's desk was perfectly organized, just as he always kept it. A small cactus plant sat by the window, somehow still alive. A photo showed Rodriguez with his Valorian wife and their 2 children. Even they were gone. Every mixed family with human blood had disappeared that night. The only thing left behind were messages. Short, polite messages delivered to friends, colleagues, and loved ones across the galaxy. They all said basically the same thing. Thank you for the memories. Live well, that was it. 200 years of friendship, trade, and cooperation ended with a form letter. Zekthor's communicator buzzed. Administrator, the council meeting is about to begin. He sighed and left the empty embassy. Outside, Kelthera Prime's twin suns cast long shadows across the city. Human-designed buildings stood mixed with traditional Kelthani architecture. The humans had been so good at blending in, making themselves part of everything without taking over. Maybe that was why no one had noticed how important they really were, until now. The council chambers buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from 47 species filled the curved seats that surrounded the central speaking platform. Everyone was talking at once, their various forms of communication creating a chaos of sounds, lights, and chemical signals. Trade Minister Grixvon of the Valorian Empire stood at the central podium. His golden scales gleamed under the chamber lights as he called for order. The Valorians were the strongest military force in the council, and they knew it. Fellow beings, Grixvon announced, his voice booming through the translation systems. We gathered today to discuss the human situation. I want to make something clear from the start. The Valorian Empire does not need humans. We never did. They were useful trading partners, yes, but we handled galactic commerce for 3,000 years before they showed up with their little metal ships. Several representatives nodded in agreement. The Mantari delegate clicked his approval. The Zephyrian ambassador's crystal body glowed brighter. Furthermore, Grixvon continued, our analysis shows that human departure may actually benefit council trade. Their constant demands for ethical business practices and worker rights slowed down many profitable operations. Now we can return to traditional efficiency. Science Director Yelahan of the Kelthani stepped forward. Her white fur was perfectly groomed, and her large eyes held the cold intelligence her species was famous for. The Ministry of Science agrees. Human researchers were always asking uncomfortable questions about our methods. They seemed obsessed with something they called peer review and reproducible results. Our teams are already working faster without their interference. More agreement rippled through the chamber. Many species had found humans frustrating to work with. They asked too many questions. They wanted to understand everything instead of just following established procedures. They insisted on testing ideas that everyone knew were impossible, but not everyone was convinced. Counselor Veth of the Nexari stood slowly. At 800 years old, she was one of the oldest beings in the council. Her ancient species had seen empires rise and fall across the galaxy. Honored colleagues, she said, her mental voice reaching every mind in the chamber. I have lived long enough to see patterns others might miss. In my experience, when something seems too easy, it usually is. What do you mean, Counselor? Asked the Draxian representative, his snake-like body coiling nervously. I mean that in 8 centuries of life, I have never seen an entire species coordinate such a perfect exodus. Every human, every ship, every family, all gone in one night. This was planned. planned for a very long time. The question we should be asking is not why they left, but why they felt they needed to. The chamber fell quiet. Veth's words carried weight that came with her incredible age and experience. Grixvon's scales darkened with irritation. Counselor, with respect, you're seeing mystery where none exists. Humans were always strange. They probably just decided to explore beyond our borders. Good luck to them. Meanwhile, we have practical matters to handle. Trade routes to reorganize. Resource distribution to optimize. The galaxy doesn't stop spinning because one species got wanderlust. But Veth wasn't finished. Has anyone tried to contact their home system, Earth? Of course, Zekthor answered from his administrative seat. We sent 3 different expeditions. They found nothing. Not destroyed, not conquered, just empty. Like humans never existed at all. The humans even took their dead, added Dr. Mortex, the Helix Union's chief medical officer. Every cemetery, every memorial, every trace of their history. Who does that? An uncomfortable silence settled over the chamber. The idea that an entire species could erase themselves so completely was disturbing to everyone present. Perhaps, suggested the Aquarian delegate through bubbling water sounds, they discovered something that required them to leave. A threat we don't know about? Then why didn't they warn us? Demanded Grixvon. If there was danger, wouldn't they have told their precious council friends? That question hung in the air like a toxic gas. Humans had been generous with warnings in the past. They had saved dozens of worlds from disasters, invasions, and plagues. If they had left without warning anyone about danger, what did that mean? Counselor Veth spoke again, her mental voice heavy with concern. I propose we investigate what humans were actually doing during their time with us. Not just their official roles, but everything. Where they went, who they talked to. What they fixed. Waste of resources, Grixvon snapped. They're gone, we move on. That's what successful species do. The vote was 41-6 against Veth's investigation. Only the oldest species in the council supported her. Everyone else was eager to prove they didn't need humans. As the meeting ended and representatives filed out, Veth remained in her seat. Zekthor approached her, his expression troubled. Counselor, do you really think we're missing something important? Veth's ancient eyes held depths of knowledge that made Zekthor feel like a child. Administrator, in my long life I have learned that the most important things are often invisible. Like air, like gravity, like the way humans used to smile when they thought no one was watching, as if they knew a secret that made them happy. What secret? That's what we need to find out. Before it's too late. Outside the council chambers, the galaxy continued its ancient dance. Ships traveled between stars. Trade flowed across the emptiness. Life went on. But in the human embassy on Kelthera Prime, the coffee grew cold, and the cactus plant waited for someone who would never return. Captain Dexali had flown cargo ships for 30 years. He knew every safe route between the core worlds and the outer rim. So when his navigation computer insisted on taking him through the Crimson Nebula, he thought it was broken. Computer, recalculate route to Nexus Station, he ordered from his pilot seat. Route optimized. Estimated travel time. 14 hours through Crimson Nebula approach. Dexali's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. The Crimson Nebula was a nightmare of radiation storms and gravity wells. No one flew through there. Everyone knew that. Show me alternative routes. No alternative routes available. This path provides optimal fuel efficiency and cargo safety. That made no sense. Dexali pulled up the old navigation charts, the ones from before the humans had helped upgrade the galactic shipping network. According to these charts, there were 6 different safe routes to Nexus Station. All of them went around the nebula, not through it. But somehow, over the past 10 years, everyone had started using the routes that went through dangerous space. The computer said they were safer. The humans had vouched for them. And nothing bad had happened. Until now. 6 months after the humans disappeared, ships were starting to vanish in those optimized routes. 3 vessels lost this week alone. No distress signals. No wreckage, just gone. Dexali made a decision that would save his life. He ignored the computer and used the old route around the nebula. It took 2 days longer and cost more fuel, but he arrived safely at Nexus Station. He wasn't the only one having problems. Across the galaxy, systems that had worked perfectly for years were beginning to fail in strange ways. The failures were small at first, easy to ignore. A mining operation that suddenly couldn't extract ore from an asteroid field. A research station that lost all its data when trying to transfer files between computers made by different species. A diplomatic meeting that ended in violence because the translation system couldn't handle a simple disagreement. Dr. Yilahan of the Kelthani Science Ministry stood in her laboratory, staring at 30 years of research that had just proved itself worthless. The breakthrough discovery her team had been celebrating for months was based on preliminary work done by human researchers. Work that contained errors. Not big errors. Small ones. Tiny mistakes that seemed obvious when pointed out. But humans weren't there to point them out anymore. Director, her assistant said nervously, should we contact the human embassy for clarification? Yilahan's ears flattened against her head. The embassy's empty, you fool. They're all gone, remember? The assistant's tail drooped. Then what do we do? This research was supposed to revolutionize power generation across 12 worlds. We start over, Yilahan said through gritted teeth, and we do it without human help. But starting over was harder than expected. The research had built on human work for so long that untangling it felt impossible. Every equation led back to a human insight. Every breakthrough stood on foundations laid by human minds. Meanwhile, on Valoran Prime, Trade Minister Grixvan faced his own crisis. The asteroid mining operation in the Zirion system had stopped working. Not broken, not destroyed, just stopped. The massive machines that carved ore from space rock sat silent in the void. What's the problem? Grixvan demanded of his chief engineer. The maintenance protocols, Minister. They're written in human technical language. Our engineers can't understand them. Then translate them. We tried, sir. The translations don't work. Human engineering uses concepts that don't exist in our language. They have 17 different words for almost working correctly and 34 ways to describe types of mechanical stress that our computers can't even measure, Grixvan's golden scales darkened to bronze with anger. Are you telling me that the mighty Valorian Empire can't maintain machines because we don't understand human words? The engineer's scales went pale. Sir, it's more than words. Humans built these machines to work in ways that make sense to human minds. They think differently than we do. They see patterns we miss. They solve problems by being creative. Creativity. That word made Grixvan's skin crawl. Valorians valued strength, honor, and tradition. Creativity was chaos. Creativity was weakness. Then we'll build new machines. Better machines. Valorian machines. But building new machines would take years. The Empire needed those asteroids now. Valoran Prime's war industry depended on the rare metals they provided. As problems multiplied across Council space, medical stations began reporting a strange new condition. Patients came in complaining of listlessness, lack of motivation, inability to solve simple problems that used to be easy. Dr. Mortex of the Helix Union studied the data from hundreds of cases. The symptoms were the same everywhere. Beings who had been sharp and capable were becoming dull and confused. Not sick, not injured, just less than they used to be. It's like they've forgotten how to think flexibly, he told his research team. They can follow procedures they've memorized, but ask them to adapt to something new and they freeze up. Any pattern to who's affected? Asked his assistant. That's the strangest part. It seems to hit hardest among beings who worked closely with humans. Traders who dealt with human merchants, scientists who collaborated on human projects, diplomats who negotiated with human ambassadors. The condition was spreading, slowly but steadily. Some being called it the silent plague, though it didn't seem to be caused by any virus or bacteria. It was more like the galaxy was forgetting how to learn. On Kelthera Prime, Counselor Veth received reports that confirmed her worst fears. Ancient enemies were starting to fight again. The Draxians and the Mantari had skirmished twice this month over territory disputes that had been peacefully resolved for decades. The Aquarians were threatening to cut off water trade with the desert worlds unless their demands for increased prices were met immediately. The crystal beings of Zephyr had closed their borders completely, claiming that other species were contaminating their pure thoughts. All across the galaxy, old conflicts were reigniting like dormant volcanoes suddenly coming to life. Veth studied the diplomatic records and found something disturbing. In almost every case, humans had been involved in the original peace negotiations, not as leaders or mediators, but as helpful participants who somehow made everyone feel heard and understood. Human diplomats had a gift for translation that went beyond language. They could take the concepts of one species and explain them in ways that another species could accept. They built bridges between minds that worked in completely different ways. Now those bridges were crumbling. The Galactic Communication Network was having problems too. Messages between different species were being misunderstood more often. Technical specifications were incompatible. Cultural references that used to make sense were now causing offense. It was as if the galaxy was slowly losing its ability to talk to itself. Veth called for another council meeting, but only half the representatives showed up. The others sent messages saying they were too busy dealing with local difficulties to attend. Those who did come looked tired and frustrated. The confident certainty they had shown 6 months ago was gone. "Fellow beings," Veth said to the sparse gathering, "we need to admit that we have a problem. These failures are not coincidences. They are connected to humanity's departure." "Impossible," muttered Grixvon, though his voice lacked its old authority. "One species cannot be that important, can't they?" Veth challenged. "Tell me, Minister, how many Valorian mining operations are still running at full capacity?" Grixvon's silence was answer enough. "Director Yilahun, how much of your recent research is proving reliable without human input?" The Kelthani scientist's ears drooped. "Some of it is requiring revision. And how many of you are dealing with problems that seemed impossible 6 months ago but feel obvious now that you're trying to solve them alone?" The uncomfortable shifting and nervous sounds that filled the chamber told the story better than words. "The humans didn't just work with us," Veth continued. "They changed how we worked. They taught us to think in new ways. And now that they're gone, we're forgetting how to do that. So what do you suggest?" asked the Draxian representative. "That we go crawling after them like lost children?" "I suggest we figure out why they left before we lose everything they helped us build." The meeting ended without any decisions. Everyone went back to their worlds to fight fires and fix problems that kept getting worse. But Counselor Veth stayed behind, staring at star charts and wondering what humans had seen coming that the rest of the galaxy had missed. The message arrived on every screen in every language across every world at exactly the same moment. It was simple, direct, and terrifying. Galactic Communication Network experiencing cascading failure. Estimated time to complete breakdown, 72 hours. Emergency protocols now in effect. Network Administrator Kixtara stared at the data streaming across her workstation in horror. She was a Nexari, like Counselor Veth, which meant she could process information faster than most species. Right now, she wished she couldn't understand what she was seeing. The galactic internet was dying. For 200 years, beings across the galaxy had communicated through a vast network of quantum relays and data stations. It connected every world, every ship, every outpost. It was the nervous system of galactic civilization, and it was falling apart. "How is this possible?" demanded her supervisor, Director Quantel. "The network has self-repair protocols, redundant systems, backup servers on every major world." Kixtara's 6 fingers danced across her control interface, pulling up diagnostic reports. "Sir, the problem isn't hardware failure. It's the software. The base protocols that let different species computers talk to each other. Those protocols were designed by our best programmers centuries ago." "No, sir. They were designed by us, but they were modified by humans. Small changes over the past century. Tiny improvements that made everything work better together. They called them patches." Quantel's mental voice turned sharp with panic. "Show me." The display filled with code. Lines and lines of programming instructions that looked like gibberish to most beings. But buried within the standard Nexari programming language were sections written in something else entirely. "Human code," Kixtara whispered. "It's everywhere. Thousands of little fixes and improvements. They made our systems work with Valorian military networks. They bridged Kelthani science databases with Draxian trade computers. They solved compatibility problems we didn't even know existed. Can we remove their code and run on our original systems?" Kixtara was quiet for a long moment. "Sir, I don't think there are any original systems left. The humans have been improving our network for decades. Taking out their code would be like removing someone's nervous system and expecting them to keep walking. Across the galaxy, worlds were losing contact with each other. The Aquarian ocean worlds couldn't send water shipping schedules to desert planets. Kelthani research stations couldn't access the databases they needed for their experiments. Valorian military fleets found themselves cut off from command headquarters. But the communication breakdown was just the beginning. On the agricultural world of Verdania, farmer Tolmarsh watched his crops wither and die. For 50 years, his family had used human farming techniques, simple methods that didn't require expensive technology, crop rotation schedules that seemed random but somehow worked perfectly, soil treatments that used local materials in ways that made no sense to traditional Verdanian agriculture. "Why did we stop using the old ways?" his son asked as they stared at fields of dying grain. "Because the human ways worked better," Tolmarsh replied sadly. "Much better. They taught us to work with the soil instead of fighting it, to use plants that helped each other grow instead of competing. But you know how they did it, right? You watched them." Tolmarsh's tentacles drooped. "I watched, yes. But I never understood. Humans think about growing things differently than we do. They see connections we miss. They understand how everything affects everything else." The same conversation was happening on farms across dozens of worlds. Human agricultural advisors had been quietly revolutionizing food production throughout the galaxy. Their methods seemed simple, but they were based on a deep understanding of ecological relationships that other species couldn't quite grasp. Now, without humans to explain the subtle details, crop failures were spreading like wildfire. The silent plague was spreading too, and Dr. Mortex was finally beginning to understand what it really was. He stood before a gathering of the galaxy's top medical professionals, sharing his terrifying discovery. "It's not a disease," he announced. "It's learned helplessness on a massive scale. When humans were here, they didn't just solve problems for us. They taught us to solve problems differently. They showed us new ways to think, to adapt, to be creative. But we're intelligent species," protested Dr. Yilahan, who had traveled from Kelthera Prime for this emergency medical conference. "We don't need humans to think for us." "No, but we needed them to show us how to think flexibly. Most species develop intelligence in specific patterns. We get very good at certain types of problems, but we get stuck when we face new challenges. Humans were different. They could change their thinking based on what they encountered." Dr. Mortex activated a holographic display showing brain scans from various species. "Look at these neural patterns. This is a Valorian brain solving a standard military problem. Efficient, logical, perfect for what their species evolved to do." The brain scan showed neat, organized patterns of activity. "Now look at this same Valorian solving a problem that requires creative thinking." The new scan showed chaos. Random firing, confusion. Most species panic when faced with truly novel challenges. But humans, he switched to a human brain scan. Even though it was from archived data, the difference was obvious. The human brain showed complex flowing patterns that seemed to dance between order and chaos. Humans could switch between different thinking modes naturally, and somehow when they worked with us, they taught our brains to do the same thing, not permanently but temporarily, like borrowing their flexibility. "You're saying we became addicted to human thinking patterns?" asked a Draxian doctor. "Not addicted, dependent. And now that they're gone, we're reverting to our old limitations. But the problems we face were designed for minds that could think like humans." The medical conference ended with more questions than answers, but across the galaxy the pattern was becoming clear. Humans hadn't just been members of galactic civilization. They had been its adaptive immune system, helping other species respond to new challenges and unexpected problems. Without them, the galaxy was losing its ability to evolve. On Valoran Prime, Trade Minister Grixvan received a report that made his scales turn gray with shock. A secret Valorian expedition had finally reached human space. "What did you find?" he demanded of Captain Rextal, the expedition leader. "Nothing, Minister. Absolutely nothing. Their systems are empty but not abandoned. It's like they were never there at all. But that's not the strangest part. What could be stranger than an entire species vanishing without a trace?" Captain Rextal's voice was barely a whisper. "We found evidence of massive construction projects. Entire solar systems reorganized. Planets moved. Stars redirected. Whatever the humans became, Minister, they're not the same species that left us 18 months ago." The implications hit Grixvan like a physical blow. If humans had the power to move planets and redirect stars, they could have destroyed the Council easily. Instead, they had simply left. Why? That question was keeping beings awake across the galaxy. As systems failed and problems multiplied, More and more species were beginning to understand what Counselor Veth had known from the beginning. Humans hadn't been just another species in the galactic community. They had been the keystone that held the whole structure together. Remove a keystone and everything else collapses. The galaxy was learning that lesson the hard way. On her private ship, Counselor Veth studied reports from across Council space. Wars resuming, planets starving, technology failing, entire species sliding into depression and despair. She opened a communication channel to Administrator Zekthor on Kelthera Prime. Administrator, I'm calling an emergency session of the Council. We need to make a decision. What kind of decision, Counselor? Whether to swallow our pride and try to bring humans back or learn to live without them. Because at the rate we're going, there won't be a galactic civilization left to save. The transmission ended, leaving Veth alone with her thoughts and the growing certainty that the galaxy had made a terrible mistake. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity had moved on to something greater. The question was whether the species they left behind could do the same. The emergency council session was unlike any in galactic history. Only 23 species sent representatives. The others were too busy fighting wars, battling plagues, or watching their civilizations collapse to attend diplomatic meetings. Those who did come looked broken. Trade Minister Grixvon's golden scales had faded to dull bronze. Dr. Yilahan's white fur was patchy and unkempt. Even the proud crystal beings of Zephyr appeared clouded and dim. Counselor Veth stood at the central podium, 800 years of wisdom weighing heavy on her ancient shoulders. Around her, the once grand council chambers felt empty and cold. Fellow beings, she began, her mental voice reaching every mind present. 3 years ago, humanity vanished from our galaxy. We told ourselves we didn't need them. We were wrong. The question now is what we do about it. What can we do? Asked the Mantari delegate, his insect-like features twitching with nervousness. They're gone. Our attempts to contact them have failed. For all we know, they're dead. They're not dead, Grixvon interrupted. My scouts found evidence of massive engineering projects in human space. Whatever they've become, they're far beyond anything we can imagine. A heavy silence settled over the chamber. The implications were terrifying. If humans had evolved beyond recognition, would they even want to help their former allies? Then we learn to help ourselves, declared Dr. Yilahan. We study what they left behind. We figure out how they thought. We become what they were. Veth nodded slowly. That may be our only choice. I propose a new kind of investigation. Not just looking for humans, but understanding what made them special. What did they know that we didn't? How did they think differently? Administrator Zekthor activated the chamber's central display. I've been preparing for this possibility. We've gathered every piece of human technology, every cultural artifact, every recorded conversation we could find. It's all here. The display filled with information. Thousands of documents, videos, audio recordings, and data files. The accumulated knowledge of humanity's 200-year relationship with the galaxy. Where do we start? Asked the Draxian representative. With the basics, Veth replied. How did humans solve problems? The investigation began immediately. Teams of researchers from every remaining species dove into human archives, trying to understand the mysterious thinking patterns that had made humans so effective. Dr. Mortex led the psychological research team. He studied hours of recordings showing humans at work, trying to identify what made them different. Look at this, he told his assistants, playing a video of a human engineer named Sarah Kim working on a broken starship engine. Watch how she approaches the problem. In the video, Sarah stood looking at the damaged engine for several minutes without moving. Then she walked around it, examining it from different angles. She touched various components, listened to sounds, even smelled different parts. She's gathering information, observed Dr. Yilahan, who had joined the research team, but not in any systematic way. She's letting the machine tell her what's wrong. Exactly, Dr. Mortex agreed. Most species would run diagnostics, check error codes, follow standard repair procedures. Sarah is having a conversation with the machine. They watched as Sarah suddenly smiled and went to work. Her repairs were creative, using components in ways they weren't designed for, making temporary fixes that somehow worked better than permanent ones. She's thinking with her hands, Dr. Mortex realized. Humans don't just solve problems in their heads. They solve them with their whole bodies. They feel their way to solutions. This discovery led to more questions. Human problem-solving wasn't just different. It was multidimensional. They used logic, intuition, emotion, and physical sensation all at the same time. Meanwhile, Counselor Veth focused on human cultural artifacts. She studied their literature, art, music, and entertainment, looking for clues about how their minds worked. They tell stories about everything, she reported to the Research Council. Humans use narratives to understand reality. They don't just collect facts. They weave facts into stories that help them see patterns and possibilities. She showed examples of human science fiction, stories where they imagined different futures and explored the consequences of their choices. Look at this. They created detailed scenarios about problems that didn't exist yet, then figured out how to solve them. They practiced adapting to change by imagining change. That's impossible, protested a Valorian military analyst. You can't prepare for unknown problems. You can if you think like a human, Veth replied. They didn't prepare for specific problems. They prepared to be adaptable. They trained their minds to be flexible. The research revealed layer after layer of human complexity. They had concepts that didn't exist in other languages. Words like serendipity for finding good things by accident, anti-fragility for systems that got stronger when stressed, emergent properties for solutions that arose naturally from complex interactions. Most importantly, they had emotional relationships with ideas. Humans didn't just understand concepts, they felt excited about them, frustrated by them, protective of them. Their emotions drove their creativity in ways that purely logical species couldn't match. Dr. Yilahan made a breakthrough while studying human educational methods. They don't just teach facts, she announced to her team. They teach approaches. Look at this human school curriculum. The display showed lesson plans from a human elementary school. Instead of memorizing information, children were taught to ask questions, experiment, fail safely, and try again. They played games that had no single correct answer. They were rewarded for creativity as much as accuracy. They were training their young to think adaptively from the very beginning, Dr. Yilahan realized. While we teach our children what to think, humans taught their children how to think. But the most important discovery came from studying human diplomacy and cultural exchange. Administrator Zekthor found something remarkable in the archives. They were translating more than language, he reported. Humans served as cultural interpreters between species. When Valorians and Draxians couldn't understand each other's perspectives, humans helped them find common ground. The files showed thousands of small interventions. Human diplomats who helped species understand each other's motivations. Human traders who found ways to make deals fair for everyone involved. Human scientists who explained complex ideas in ways that different types of minds could grasp. They were teaching us to understand each other, Zekthor continued. Not just facts and data, but feelings and viewpoints. They helped us become a real community instead of just a collection of separate species. This revelation hit the researchers like a cold wind. Humans hadn't just been good at adapting to change. They had been good at helping others adapt. They were natural teachers, guides, and bridge builders. And they had been doing it so quietly that no one noticed until they were gone. The investigation took on new urgency as the galaxy continued to deteriorate. More worlds were going dark. More species were isolating themselves. The galactic community was fragmenting into scared, suspicious groups that could no longer trust or understand each other. But the research was starting to pay off. Some species were learning to apply human-style thinking to their problems. Kelthani scientists began using emotional intuition alongside logical analysis. Valorian engineers started asking what-if questions instead of just following procedures. It was working slowly, but it might not be fast enough. As the 4th anniversary of humanity's departure approached, Counselor Veth made a decision that would change everything. She stood before the few remaining council members and made an announcement that shocked them all. "We're going to try to contact them," she declared, "not to ask them to come back, not to beg for help, but to show them what we've learned. To prove that we've grown beyond our dependence. How? Skrixfun. We don't even know where they are." Veth smiled, and for the first time in years it was a genuinely hopeful expression. "We're going to think like humans. We're going to try something impossible and see what happens." The plan was audacious, desperate, and completely illogical. It was exactly the kind of thing humans would have tried. Maybe that was why it might actually work. The device floating in space looked impossible. It was built from the wreckage of 100 different technologies, welded together with materials that shouldn't have been compatible. Felorian military alloys mixed with Kelthani crystal matrices. Draxian biocircuits grown through Nexari quantum processors. Aquarian flow dynamics channeling energy through Mantari hive mind networks. It was the most beautiful thing Counselor Veth had ever seen. "Transmission array is ready," reported engineer Telnara, a young Kelthani who had learned to think with human-style intuition. "I still don't understand how it works, but the patterns feel right." Veth nodded. That was perhaps the most human thing anyone had said in 5 years. The device had been built not through careful engineering, but through collaborative inspiration. Dozens of species working together, each contributing their unique abilities, guided by principles they had learned from studying human culture. It shouldn't have worked. By all traditional logic, it was a disaster waiting to happen. But it hummed with potential energy, ready to send a message across dimensions that conventional science said didn't exist. "Begin transmission," Veth ordered. The message was simple, not a plea for help or an apology for past mistakes, just a demonstration. Mathematical proofs that showed the galaxy had learned to think in new ways. Cultural artifacts that revealed species learning to understand each other. Evidence of cooperation between traditional enemies. Most importantly, it included something humans had always valued: stories. Tales of growth, adaptation, and hope from across the galaxy. The transmission lasted exactly 1 human hour. Then the device went silent, its purpose complete. They waited. For 3 days, nothing happened. Some species began to drift away, convinced the effort had failed. Others argued for trying again with different technology. Then the sky changed. It started as a whisper of light in the darkness between stars. A gentle glow that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Ships' sensors couldn't measure it, but every living being in the galaxy could feel it. The presence was vast, complex, and achingly familiar. It touched minds across countless worlds, not with words but with pure understanding. "We heard you." The sensation was overwhelming. Joy, pride, love, and something else. Something like graduation. Images flooded the consciousness of every being capable of receiving them. Visions of what humanity had become. Not the small, struggling species that had left 5 years ago, but something magnificent and transcendent. They had evolved beyond physical form, becoming beings of pure consciousness and creative energy. They existed now in dimensions that normal matter couldn't reach, exploring possibilities that conventional minds couldn't imagine. But they remembered. They remembered every friend, every colleague, every moment of joy they had shared with the galaxy they had left behind, and they were proud. You learned. The communication came not as words, but as deep emotional understanding that bypassed language entirely. Humanity shared their perspective on what had happened and why. They had not left because they were angry or disappointed. They had left because they loved the galaxy too much to let it remain dependent on them. For decades, they had watched other species become reliant on human problem-solving abilities. They had seen civilizations grow comfortable letting humans handle the difficult challenges instead of developing their own adaptive capabilities. Humanity had faced a choice: remain and become permanent caretakers of a galaxy that would never grow beyond its limitations, or leave and force other species to develop their own strength. They had chosen love over comfort, growth over security. You suffered, we suffered too, but you learned to fly. The visions continued, showing humanity's own transformation. Leaving the galaxy had been agonizing for them as well. They had torn themselves away from everything they loved because they understood what the cost of staying would be. In the void between galaxies, they had evolved rapidly, becoming something beyond their original nature, but they had never forgotten the friends they had left behind or stopped, hoping that those friends would grow into their own potential. You are ready. Now what followed was a gift unlike anything the galaxy had ever received. Not technology or resources, but knowledge. Understanding of how consciousness worked, how creativity emerged, how different types of minds could collaborate to solve problems no single species could handle alone. But it came with a condition. Humanity would not return to take care of problems for other species. They would not resume their role as galactic problem solvers and bridge builders. Instead, they offered something better: partnership between equals. Across the galaxy, The response was immediate and dramatic. The silent plague began to lift as beings remembered how to think creatively. Not because humans had cured them, but because they finally understood what had caused their condition in the first place. They had been trying to think like humans instead of learning to think like themselves at their best. Wars that had seemed impossible to resolve suddenly found solutions. As former enemies discovered they could understand each other's perspectives without needing human translators. The Draxians and Mantari signed a peace treaty based on principles neither species had understood 5 years earlier. The Galactic Communication Network rebuilt itself in a matter of days, but not as a copy of the old system. Instead, it emerged as something new and more robust, designed by minds that had learned to blend logic with intuition, efficiency with adaptability. Food production soared as agricultural worlds applied human-inspired principles while developing their own innovations. The failures of the past 5 years had taught them to truly understand their ecosystems instead of just following procedures. But not every species made the transition successfully. Some civilizations, too rigid in their thinking patterns, couldn't adapt to the new reality. The proud hegemony of Zeltar, which had always valued tradition over innovation, gradually faded into isolation. A few militant species, unable to accept that strength came from cooperation rather than domination, collapsed into internal conflicts. These failures were mourning losses for the galaxy, but they were also necessary. Evolution required that some paths lead to dead ends. The species that survived and thrived were those that could learn, adapt, and grow. 5 years after first receiving humanity's message, the galaxy had transformed into something unprecedented. A true cooperative civilization where different types of intelligence worked together as equals. Counselor Veth, now approaching her 900th year, stood once again in the council chambers. But these chambers had changed. Instead of fixed seats arranged in hierarchical circles, the space flowed and shifted to accommodate different types of beings and different styles of communication. The chamber itself was alive, grown from a partnership between Draxian biotechnology and Kelthani crystal matrices, guided by Aquarian flow dynamics and maintained by Mantari collective consciousness. It was beautiful, functional, and impossible to understand from any single perspective. Status report, Veth requested, though the formality was unnecessary. The chamber's living systems shared information directly with all participants. 17 new civilizations have requested to join the council this year, reported Administrator Kixtara, who had evolved from network maintenance to something like galactic systems integration. All of them demonstrate adaptive thinking capabilities and cooperative potential. The Frontier Exploration Project has identified 12 habitable worlds suitable for multi-species colonies, added Captain Dexali, whose shipping business had become a model for how different species could work together in space. And the long peace holds, concluded General Rextel, formerly of the Valorian military, now coordinator of the galaxy's cooperative defense systems. No major conflicts for 37 months, but the most important report came from Dr. Yilahan, whose research into consciousness and creativity had revolutionized science across the galaxy. "We're starting to understand how to teach adaptive thinking," she announced, "not just to our own species, but across species barriers. We're developing educational methods that help any type of mind learn to be more flexible and creative." Veth felt a deep satisfaction that she had never experienced in her centuries of life. The galaxy had not just survived humanity's departure. It had grown beyond what any single species could have achieved alone, and humanity was still there in a sense. Not as physical beings, but as a presence that could be felt by those who knew how to look. They watched, they learned, and occasionally they offered gentle guidance to civilizations ready to hear it. The message they had left was simple but profound. True strength came not from solving others' problems, but from teaching them to solve their own. True love sometimes meant stepping away so that others could grow. As Veth prepared to leave the council chambers for the last time, her replacement, a collaborative team of 3 different species, was ready to take over. She paused at the memorial wall. There, alongside monuments to great leaders and heroes from across the galaxy, was a simple plaque. It bore no names, no dates, no grand proclamations. Just a few words in the common galactic script: "Thank you for teaching us to fly." Above those words, preserved in crystal and renewed each day by volunteer caretakers, was a small cactus plant.